I think there's two other reasons why there's still a certain hesitation or three, from I think number one, to be fair to them, I don't think they really understand it.
I agree. Which means, we are so often asked to develop some offerings for trainings and so on, and they always talk about the project managers. And I say, well, fine, good, train your project managers, but what about your project owners or sponsors?
We understand it.
We are HR. No, we are HR. We cannot touch them, and that's too tricky. And the second question is, what about the project team members? How far they don't need the comprehensive training a project manager requires, but they need to understand
the process,
the language,
the milestones, the basic framework of it. Yeah, I agree with you.
And their roles in the project, and that when there is a project team meeting and something is going wrong, they need to speak up.
Yeah. So I think the other reason, behind not knowing what it is and not knowing whether it's relevant, maybe it's too operational, is the mentality. I don't need to know that, or that's below me. Somebody else is taking care of it. I think that's still a mentality that's very, very dominant, which I think is detrimental. And I think
it takes time.
Yeah. And
if you're a project owner or steering committee member, I would say half a day every 2 weeks are required. Yeah. It depends on in which phase we are, how complex the project is, and so on. But
yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the and we always say that we have different things that you mentioned, that the number one problem with change is that the automatic reaction to change is resistance.
Correct.
It's in the DNA of human beings that we prefer, even if our situation is crappy, we prefer the known crappy situation to the unknown better situation, because it just gives us anxiety. And I think there's a hidden subconscious psychology also in projects, and that is fear. I think I think the line organization, which is where the power is at home, the Machiavellian power of an organization, which is necessary, I think they're highly suspicious of the integrative function of project management and where we put our fingers into. I'll give you an example. I did a podcast with a Navy SEAL and with a U.S. Army officer last year, where I discussed the similarity between military organizations and line organizations, because we come from that. That's where we borrowed it from. And in the military, there's a beautiful analogy that compares line organization with a matrix organization. A military is dominant through size, numbers, process, orders, command, obey. Okay, very strict rules. But there is no modern military that in certain contexts, in special contexts, hostage situations, highly difficult, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations, you're not going to send out a whole company or a whole battalion, because that could be detrimental. It could have serious implications. So what military has learned to augment their operational capacity with and capabilities with is special forces. Okay? For me, special forces are the best analogy of what project teams are. What you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this concept of focus. Highly trained, highly motivated, totally interdisciplinary, completely agile in their mentality. They know the rules, they know when to bend them, right? And they're focused on getting things done and not fulfilling some stupid process. Okay, I think, because I've noticed this also when you talk to officers. Officers like special forces in the moment, but they find them suspect permanently because they have a rogue element to them. They disrupt the force, to use Star Wars language. They disrupt the halls of power. I think, for example, functional leads, line organizations, feel that project managers interfere in their scope of decision making. They interfere with their processes. They interfere with their hardware. They interfere with their resources. And I think there's a certain hesitancy to not want to give project management more power than you absolutely need to. And I think that's why I think the temporary nature of projects is partly not just attributed because it makes sense, but I think it's also a way for the line organization to curb the potential influence that project managers would have on an organization.
So you need to show them the benefits of giving it away, because they might be project managers next time for themselves. And so again, it's a mindset question. And yes, there's resistance, and therefore you need to make this understandable and explain it to the people, for sure. Yeah.